Hello and welcome back to another Django tutorial. So this is the start of a new mini theory series of videos covering the theory of class-based views in Django. So I intend to, in this series, take you through step by step and have a look at each of the different class-based views that are built into Django, go through some of the theory and give you an idea of how and why you might want to use that particular view. In this tutorial, we focus on the first of the Django generic views, TemplateView. So let's answer the question, what are class-based views? In Django, a view is described as a callable. So it takes in a request and it returns a response. So generally, we use a URL to connect and direct requests to the views. So you've probably seen in Django, there's two approaches to creating views, a function-based approach and a class-based approach. So there's probably no right or wrong way to work here, whether you want to use function-based views or class-based views. So really we're asking ourselves the question, how do we want to develop our application? So using class-based views, it potentially provides us some additional benefits over utilizing function-based views. Generalizing the benefits of class-based views. Class-based views allows us or promotes code reuse through inheritance and mix-ins. So it allows us to better follow potentially the dry principles of reducing code duplication. These features altogether potentially then allows us to better structure our code. Class-based views have been known to cause some challenges for new users to Django. With functions, you generally have all the code up front. You're in charge and control of the code and you can see it and it's in front of you. With class-based views, and particularly utilizing Django's generic views, the generic class-based views built into Django inherit methods and attributes from other views. This does mean generally that we're writing less code than if we were using function-based views, but it does provide a level of abstraction. By this I mean for new users, you're not necessarily seeing all of the work that's being done because it's being abstracted to these other inherited methods and attributes. So some people refer to this as the magic and suggest that Django has too much magic in these class-based views that are available in Django. So the whole point of this series is to take the magic out of class-based views or the generic class-based views and give you an overview of all the different generic class-based views that Django has to offer. So by now I've established that Django has class-based views, pre-written code available for us to create our views using class-based views. So it's these generic views that I'm going to be focusing on in the first couple of tutorials in this series. You can see here that we can access in our view the generic views or class-based views via the Django views generic. Starting from what is probably the most basic class-based view that we can build, the template view. So I'm going to give you some examples in a minute, or an example of using the template view, but let's just start by saying, when might you use a template view or the template view? So this is a generic view and generally used to show static pages, or alternatively, pages that use GET requests. So this is your maybe bog standard page, static page that you've created, for example, an About Us page that maybe doesn't take any data from a database, just a static page, although we can do that, but nothing else is on that page potentially where users interact and maybe add new data to the database and send requests back. So generally, you're not going to be using the generic template view for showing a page with a form on the page, or maybe creating or updating data on the database. And this is simply because there are better options. So now let's have a look at how we actually implement the template view. First up, we're going to be utilizing the template view within the URL configuration. So in actual fact, we don't actually need to build a view to utilize this class-based view. The code for this tutorial, you can download this code and follow along. So this is an example of using template view within a URL. So here, for example, we have an application called CBV. We have the main core application in core. So that's the current setup we got here. But you can see here, we're going to be importing from generics the template view. And then within the URL, we define the path as per normal. And then we go ahead and define our view. So here we say template view as view. So here what we're doing is we're taking the template view and all the pre-written code that's within, so all the methods and attributes within here, and we're just utilizing it as it is. So there's no difference here from creating our own view using a function. This would just be calling that there. But you need to remember here that these generic views are pre-written views. So we're just hooking into that view. And now we have the opportunity to override and add to the attributes inside of the parentheses here. So there's two attributes that we can add into the parentheses of the view here. So the first is the template name. So this is basically, as it sounds, it's the template name, the template that we're going to be utilizing. So in your templates, there's going to be a template called example ex1, and it's obviously going to send you there. So when you go to the URL, this URL here is going to take you to that template. So in addition to that, we have extra context. So we can pass in extra context. So we have to utilize the attribute extra context, and there we can then add some context. In this case, we've got this key value, so title and the value, custom title. So we can output a context or data directly from our URL patterns here, utilizing the template view. So going back to this slide here, it starts to make sense here. So we have the class-based view that we're utilizing, template view. We pass changes to class-based view inside the as view, and arguments passed in to the as view will override attributes set on the original class, which is the template view class. So remember that the template view class, the built-in class, is behind the scenes. It is just like a view we'd normally create as a function, but is a class, and so therefore it means that we're able to inherit the attributes and methods within inside the template view and override them. To fully understand what is actually going on here, we need an understanding really of object-oriented practices, the idea of classes, inheritance, and such. So if that doesn't make sense, or if you're not familiar with object-oriented programming, this is where things start to fall down a bit. And I guess new users to Django who don't necessarily also have a background in object-oriented programming, this is where the abstraction probably and difficulty understanding class-based views may come into play. So to give you an idea, these classes here at the top are already pre-written in Django. Here, the template view and other views that we'll be covering in this series, these are the class-based generic views that we use. Now, this view here is inheriting all the methods and attributes from these classes here at the top. So that allows us then to utilize all the functionality in these three elements here and what's in the template view to generate all the instructions that are needed to take in a user request and then to create a response and then send a response back to the user. So the reality here is that if you wanted to fully understand exactly what's going on here, you would need to read up on these different views here and the template view and see what's happening inside so that you can have a better understanding of how you can then and what you can overwrite and actually do in this class-based view here, the template view. So there isn't too much to understand in reality in terms of what you can do with this template view, because it is really just a simplistic class-based view where we can take in a simple request and send a response, typically just a URL, and maybe some context. So let's have a look at an example of using TemplateView in the view. So here you can see the setup. I haven't explained it fully, apologies. So we've just got the core application here with the settings, and we've got this CBV application here, and I've just set up some templates and some views. And you can see here in the URLs, in the CBV URLs, I've set up an additional path now to ex2, example 2. And now we're going to create a view here utilizing the generic template view. So go inside of the view, and you're going to see a few bits inside of here. I've tried to left some instructions and some comments for you to understand what's happening here. Sometimes comments can kind of get in the way and it just looks a bit like what's going on. So here you can see I've imported the template view. Now we've established that the template view is inheriting the template response mixin, the context mixing, and the view. So that's all happening behind the scenes. So what we can do now is I've created a simple database just with one field, name, just to provide an example. And you can see here now we create a new class, and I've just called that class ex2 view, example 2 view. And we're connecting or inheriting or extending, from the template view. Okay, so like it says here, the template response mixin. So this is the first thing that gets inherited or the template view inherits from. So it provides a mechanism to construct a template response given a suitable context. So these are some of the attributes that we can pass into that. The first one, which is probably the main one, is the template name. So I'm just going to get rid of that to make it easy to understand what's going on. So this is the first attribute that we can pass into this template view here, or override the attributes. And here's a template name. So obviously that's generating or connecting to our template, which is inside of here, the templates folder ex2. Okay, so that's our template. And what you'll find from reading is that we can also pass in, for example, or define the template engine. So maybe we're using a different engine, Jinja or Genshi. These are different templates engines. So if you're not familiar with template engines, Django obviously has its own template engine that we utilize, and we can override that and utilize other template engines. So other attributes that we can change is the response class, custom template loading or custom context object instantiation. Instantiation, sorry. And then we have the content type. So here we have the default Django content type that's being utilized if we don't define this. So that's the text HTML. So these are just additional attributes that we can define. Generally, to set up a simple template view, we might just set the template name, and that's then completed. So now we want to potentially add some context or return some context. So we can do that here, you can see, by utilizing the content or context mixin. So let's go back to our diagram. So here we set up the template response mixin, where we define or we override the attribute, which is the template attribute. So that's where we get all those attributes I've just shown you from. So now we're looking at the context mixing. So this provides us a whole load of different items that we can configure. So one of them is the context. So here we can define context. So here we set up the context via get context data. And now we start to kind of overwrite or add some context. So you can see here that I've created a context called posts. Inside of that, I've just looped through the database. Well, I've just got one item from the database in this case. So I've made a query. So now I've got all the data from the database inside of this context here. And then the second item here, just for an example, I've called data. I've just added a string here. So now we can return that back to the template. Okay, so that's all achieved and managed, remember, via the pre-written context mixin that's inherited in. So please do let me know if this is sinking in, this makes sense to you, because there's almost no point having this video if it doesn't make sense, if what I'm saying you don't quite understand. I'm not saying it in a simplistic or in a way that you're connecting to. then please let me know. I will actually write something for you if you've got any questions, etc. I do actually want you to understand this. This is why I'm making this video. This is not a financial move. This is purely for learning. So I do want you to be able to learn this content. So please just let me know. So let's just finish up here by just starting the server, and it should work okay. So the code, like I said, is available. So again, we've got the URLs set up, we've got the models in place, and we've got some templates. So let's just see what this looks like. So there's no surprises here. You can see that we set up the two URLs, and let's go now and just go to EX1. So this was the first example where we passed in some data. In this case, we passed in the custom title. So let's just go back to our URL. So you can see here, we passed in this extra content here called, title. So we reference it via title. So if I go into the EX1 HTML, that's what we just saw, you can see I'm referencing the title and any other data utilizing the doubles here. And let's now have a look at number 2. So you can see here I've got data and post name. So data was some context I passed in from the view. So data should say context data for ex2, and I've added some data to a database, just one item. I'm just extracting that out and putting it into posts. So let's remember that we're returning the data in posts, and then we need to drill down to actually get to the database data. So in the models, it's called name. So this is why in our file here, in the ex2, this is why I'm calling posts or referring to posts and then drilling down to the name. So that's the exact data I want. If I don't do that, here I'm just returning the object back. So if I refresh the page on ex2, example 2, you can see it just says post object 1. So to actually drill down to the data, if you're not familiar with this, then all you need to do is add in the data that you want. So in this case, the title, and that's the specific data that I'm looking for. And that didn't work because it's name, not title. So the name, so this is referring to the name in the model, the name, that's what I'm looking for. And there we go. Okay, so if you've just written your first class-based view, then congratulations, well done. We're now going to cover more of the generic class-based views inside Django. I'll go through each one and give you a little bit of explanation like I've done here and some more examples. This is a fairly simple view to utilize in comparison to some of the other views that are available and the amount of different attributes and facilities that are available in those other views. But hopefully you can see here the context of this class-based view and when you might want to use it. It really is just the standard or a standard class-based view where we can just throw out a new template and maybe just return some data on the page. So remember here that we're not taking data in. So originally I said this isn't very good or isn't equipped for actually returning data in. So why I said that, and I said that there are other better placed class-based views for that, is because again, if you look here in this, what the template view is actually inheriting, it doesn't necessarily support the tools and the features that you're going to need to return data from the template. And this is why, again, I suggest that this isn't necessarily the best class-based view to utilize to show a form or input or post a form data to this view. Okay, so hopefully that's making sense, and hopefully you're seeing how everything is starting to be generated or how everything is formulated in Django with these generic class-based views. So thank you very much for listening. Hopefully you got to the end. If you did, like I said, if you've got any comments or questions, sorry, just let me know. If you feel as though I can improve something here, also let me know. I'm happy to make a version 2 of this, not a problem. So here, I know I'm going on, but really try and focus on this idea here. This is the main part that I wanted you to kind of start to scaffold in your mind. so that we can work on other class-based views, the generic views that are built in. Because once you understand what's happening here, your understanding of why and when you might want to use a particular class-based view. And obviously, once you get better at understanding what the class-based views do, the generic class-based views, we'll have a much better understanding of when we can use them and also what you're going to use them for. I realize that I'm just repeating myself now. And also, we can start to then build our own class-based views.